For the first time in the history of this podcast, we have a March Madness edition of the podcast where Louisville's actually in the bracket. This is Floyd Street's finest. He is Phil Baker, ESPN Louisville Sunday Morning Hangover. I am, among other things, I am Jack Grossman. Cards are in the bracket, not in the way that any of us actually thought it would be, and we will be starting with that for sure. But Phil, again, this is Floyd Street's finest, part of the Field 68 Podcast Network. You can find us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're consuming this. I'm on Twitter at JackGrossman97. He's at Phil_Baker. I'm also on the Blue Sky app as well if you do that thing at Jack Grossman. It's quite literally the same account. I'm not going to BS anyone there. It's a lot of copy and pasting because I'm like, if this Twitter thing dies, we're going to do that. But Phil, Selection Sunday, cards back in the bracket, in a spot that by the time the selection show started, no one really thought. And man, that was a haymaker right there, like 6:04. Louisville's the third team red after Auburn in the play-in game.
Yeah, no, it's nice to be on here and not talking about all the smut and coaching searches. It's actually nice to be talking basketball,
yes.
but it's funny. So this is one you and I have talked over the years, and this is one of our favorite days of the year. The bracket unveil, just everything that comes with it. It's a great time here, especially in this region of the country that eats, sleeps, and breathes college basketball. And you don't have kiddos yet, but when you get to the time when they start watching the troll movies of the year. So I don't know how aware you are of it, but basically there's like negative people in the world just kind of going through the motions. And you're just kind of like, they're just not happy. They're not going through. That's what I felt like Louisville was the last few years. And then you're trying to get some positivity and actually talk about basketball. And you were that beacon of light, Jack Grossman. You were one of the colorful trolls out there. And I say that in the most endearing way, tried to go through all the smut that was out there. But like you, I sit down. The kiddo gets the 55-inch TV. I go to the laptop. I prefer that, just watching it, have it on there, getting ready to sit down. Auburn, not really a surprise, kind of a surprise, but not. I was curious what they were going to do with the number 1 overall seed.
I was too, with the way Auburn ended the season.
Same. So, but again, not too surprising, but just some insight. But as soon as I'm like sitting down my laptop, I'm getting set up and everything. Louisville. And I'm going, what? Like and I felt like I got Shawn Michaels super kicked from just the standpoint of like, hey, what the hell just happened? Like we were on Bracket Matrix yesterday morning during the show, Sunday Morning Hangover on ESPN Louisville, and we're going through it. And I think Bozich put out the tweet, out of 111 brackets, only 2 had them at the 11th seed. So I say
twice as many had him as a 4 seed.
Right, exactly. So the thing that was wild to me, and we get this a lot too. I mean, you remember the text line at ESPN Louisville. It's a lot of people just like you're being and moaning about nothing or something that hadn't happened yet. And I said, look, this is kind of the thing. I go back to the COVID year when they were the first team that was left out because we'd never seen anything like this. And when you fast forward to this, I began seeing like I know you don't watch Game of Thrones, but the opening scene of Game of Thrones, it's like a chessboard. And you see this throughout the season of narratives being created. And I thought this was just supposed to be math, but I had that in the back of my mind of the narratives about, and look, the ACC was not good. I want no shit. I want that to be abundantly clear. Like, I'm not trying to say that, but I did see positioning and politicking throughout the day yesterday, whether it be the Arkansas, Boogie Fland is coming back, whether it be Kentucky putting out there, Lamont Butler is going to be to go, Louisville, Rain Smith. So
Iowa State in Memphis holding out that Gilbert and Tyrese Hunter weren't going to play the tournament.
Exactly. So I say this not to have a tinfoil hat on, but from the standpoint of the politicking side of things were beginning to come out there. I know it's supposed to be math. I know it's not supposed to be college football. I know all those things out there. But when you see some of the stats and some of the numbers that are out there where other teams have been ranked in that fashion and where they were seated in years past, it's hard not to let that seep into your mind. Like that it's the college football is coming into the sport. And I hate that. Like, yeah. and hearing some of the bracketologists, look, this ain't just Louisville people. People just talk about it. And I know it's easy to go 0 to crush the city on that. This is national people Tom Crean, for example, is going in on it. You had Jerry Pobb going in on it. I know the committee of the CBS Sports Network were going in on it. The ACC and ESPN Network going in on it. So you can take
Matt Jones on ESPN Radio, of all people.
Having Pat Kelsey out there, it's like, look, man, I know I'm your biggest rival, but for him to say that, like, those are the types of things that you're just kind of like, I don't know what happened. And I know Dieter Blink talked about it a ton this morning with Paul Rogers reacting to it. But still, I think just the city is in utter shock and a fan base that's been through a lot. It's like, really? An 8 seed with the number 1 overall seed? But hey, you get to play 70 miles down the road in Lexington. So you have that.
I mean, that is a silver lining, and that's something that Louisville fans thought they were not going to get. Me included, I thought there was no chance they're going to play at Lexington, mainly because I thought they were going to avoid the 8-9 game, especially after beating Stanford on Thursday, not even going into getting that Clemson win. But the college footballization of it. And
am I too off on that?
No, because I think because we'll get to the bubble later and that nonsense, but I think you kind of saw it there as well with it. And I'm not a tinfoil hat guy. You know me. I'm very much not like that. But it's hard to look at some of these things and say, okay, this makes a lot of sense with the committee and the bracket this year. I thought they nailed the 1 seeds. I thought they nailed the 2 seeds. But there were the 5 seeds and the 8 seeds, in addition to just Louisville, just were kind of just out of whack is the best way of putting it. So I've been pulling up just a bunch of different resumes here. I have Louisville's resume and everyone else's. There is, throughout all of us, there is an out for the committee that they can fall back on. The issue is it contradicts with some of the other things that happened in the bracket with why Louisville got punished. And looking at it, comparing resumes with Louisville and other teams, Louisville only had the 4 quad 1 wins. You look at teams that were seated ahead of them that are kind of compared to them. I mean, Clemson had 5, Memphis had 6. Illinois, who was a 6 seed, has 8. Missouri, who's a 6 seed, has 7. So when you look at it on paper, number 1, they don't have as many quad 1 wins as all these teams. And number 2, you dig a little bit deeper and you can say, what does Louisville have working with them? This is what I talked about on Saturday night. The predicted metrics are pretty similar. Louisville had an edge over a lot of these teams in the resume metrics, which the way Dan Gavitt explained it on CBS during the Big Ten semifinals on Saturday was that we're using the resume metrics more to determine if you're into the field than the predicted metrics as far as seeding you, which was proven not to be the case on the bubble as well. But you look at it and you say, okay, you're using the predicted metrics to seed, but the predicted metrics are all incredibly similar with these teams. Just looking at the net rankings with Louisville, Clemson, Illinois, Missouri, all these teams are in the same conglomerate. Memphis is 49th in the net, so that doesn't make any sense at all. But you look at, okay, throwing Memphis aside, what are some of these tiebreakers that we're going to separate these teams with? Are you going to look at the resume metrics where that favors Louisville a lot, and that's where if you looked at that, Louisville would have been higher up the seed line, a 6, maybe even a 5? Or are you going to look at the quad 1 wins and dig a little bit deeper within those quad 1 wins? Who did you beat? And Louisville only beat 2 teams that made the NCAA tournament this year. Clemson, who they beat twice, who's 22nd in net, and North Carolina, who sneaked in as the last team in. Indiana and West Virginia, 2 teams that won, or 51st and 54th in net respectively, were not quad 1 wins and ended up being first 4 out, so they weren't NCAA tournament wins. So Louisville only having 3 wins over the field, 2 against 2 different teams, and only having 1 quad 1A win, Clemson being 22nd in net, a game that they just picked up on Friday, is not that impressive, to be completely honest. And looking at it compared to Clemson, for instance, the team that Louisville fans had the biggest bone to pick, which fair because you swept them. The difference between Clemson and Louisville, Clemson only has 1 more quad 1 win than you, but they beat Duke and Kentucky, the number 1 team in net and number 14 team in net. Those are just 2 wins that carry a hell of a lot more weight than what Louisville had. And if you're looking for tiebreakers within all the inertia, you're probably, if Louisville and Clemson were ranked 22nd and 23rd on the seed line, then it becomes, okay, Louisville swept Clemson, so Louisville's ahead of Clemson. But if they're more than just right next to each other, you use a more holistic approach to where you kind of say, okay, Clemson has those 2 big wins. Memphis, which I think is utterly ridiculous as a 5 seed, if you're looking for a reason to justify it, they had a neutral court win over Michigan State, who's 11th in net, a win at Clemson, who's 22nd in net again, and then wins over the 16th, 28th, and 32nd best teams in net, 2 of them being on a neutral court. Those are better wins than what Louisville has. Keep going down the road. Illinois, who's a 6th seed, who has more an abundance of quad 1 wins, but also have net wins over 15, 16 on a neutral, at 23, at 29, 19 at home, 27 at home. You look at Missouri, And they have a road win at Florida, who's fourth of the net and a 1 seed, a home win over Alabama, who's a 2 seed. Now you keep going down the road here
What
with
about
all these
St.
teams.
Mary's? That was a hot topic
I can pull
this
up.
morning too.
I can pull up St. Mary's real quick,
Because if you
and
think
find
so
that.
little, because if you think so little of the ACC, if you're the committee, and look, it wasn't a good year for the conference, and I
Right,
hate doing the conference v conference thing. I loathe it, but it's
but you
like if
kind
you're
of
going to
have to
just
do it.
right, but yeah, but the with St. Mary's, played at the powerhouse that they're in there. I know Dieter was very hot and bothered about it this morning. Talk about the some of those things as well as Memphis that you pointed out. So I guess my question is like, and I understand like you can't just do the head to head with the Clemson things because there's more games than just those 2 games throughout the season.
Right.
I get that, but it is a tough pill to swallow, and
No,
it's almost like
absolutely.
it's almost as if like a deal. This is what the text I was at. A deal was made to get Carolina in, but it's like you were going to peg Louisville down for that. That's what.
Look, here's my thing. So first of all, St. Mary's is because I don't want to make this a whole thing about Carolina. Like you have to address it because it's an absolute joke. But and this is kind of everything I'm setting up for this. But you look at St. Mary's, and they're 4-3 in quad one, so they're similar to Louisville. That same amount of quad one wins, a few less games. They're 21st in net, so a couple spots ahead of Louisville, so around the same there. You're looking at the predictives. They're around the same spot as Louisville. They're 20th in the KPI, so a little bit behind Louisville there. Strength of record is 25th, so they're behind Louisville there. So they're behind Louisville in the resume results. Similar to Louisville, but you look at their wins, they have 2 wins over Gonzaga, who's 8th in the net. That's better than anything Louisville has. It just is. So here's my thing. I agree with where everything Louisville fans are saying. I thought Louisville should have been a 6 seed. 7 at the worst especially after what they did in the ACC tournament.
You wouldn't like the 7, but you could live with it.
Right. You can explain away the 7. The 8, as I just went through way deep in the inertia, you can make a rational argument for it just because of the wins and all that stuff. And the fact, like you can say, well, Louisville went out and challenged themselves in the non-conference. They did, but they didn't win enough of the meaningful games for that to make a difference to where the ACC being as bad as it is really punished them. It really did. But
I have a question. I have a question.
You're going to ask about Carolina. That's where I'm going.
Well, no. Real quick, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I have a question about that in terms of the non-conference because you would know this. Moving forward with some of the scheduling, what if you're Josh Hurd and Pat Kelsey when making out a schedule, knowing what you know now, would you do a non-conference in the same manner that you did this year?
It's a great question because you're getting mixed signals from the committee because you rewarded North Carolina for scheduling a crap ton of teams, and you credit North Carolina for doing that. But at some point, you got to win one of those games. And North Carolina had 1 win over the field, and it was a December game against UCLA where they trailed by double digits almost the entire game. UCLA had the ball and the lead at the free throw line and choked it away. That's UNC's only quality win on the year. Right. So I get it. Yes, that's good, all good and well that Carolina scheduled hard and scheduled tough, but they lost all those games, and yet they got rewarded anyways. But then you look at Texas, who, yes, 7 quad one wins, but you look at their non-con, they had 7 quad 4 games in that. So you're rewarding Carolina for the non-con. You're not punishing Texas for the non-con. You're punishing Louisville for the non-con. You're rewarding Memphis for the non-con. You're sending Florida gets the 1 seed, which I think was the right move for Florida to get the 4th 1 seed. They get the 4th 1 seed over Tennessee and especially Alabama. And Alabama had a way tougher out elite schedule than Florida. And to where the committee is just sending so many mixed messages with how to handle the scheduling and that stuff. I always lean towards it's better for you to go out and challenge yourself. And even though the West Virginia and the Indiana wins didn't end up helping out Louisville, that might be why they're in the tournament for all we know, to be completely honest. But you look at it and you say it's better for us as people who consume college basketball to see those games and to see what Texas did with a bunch of quad 4 games. But 2, you got to find a way to win a couple of those games. I know it's not a good hand for Louisville to be dealt because they had all the injuries early in the season. Even before that, they were trying to mesh together and all that stuff early in the year with a completely new team. But at the same time, this is where I talked to Ennis about this. A broken flaw about college basketball right now is the way the season's set up because and I think Louisville's a great example of that, because we have all the non-con play in November and December and almost no non-conference play the rest of the season. You
And that's
have
the only
these
metric you can
narratives.
go off of up
Yeah,
in Thanksgiving. And then it's a crutch through the entire season without
it
any
is.
indication that the teams could have the potential to get better or adjust that are acclimated to the injuries that they sustained. And I feel like you get pigeonholed against it. I completely agree.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you look at it, and yes, you have to reward the SEC for how incredible they were in the non-conference. Yes, you have to punish the ACC for how atrocious they were in the non-conference. But because you don't get any other data points other than Duke beating Illinois on a neutral court the last 2 months of the season out of the league, you're kind of stuck in these narratives that are built out early in the season, to where if you look at it, this is one way that they should be a little bit more like college football and have non-conference games mixed in throughout the year. You should have big-time out-of-league games. I'm not saying you should have a cupcake league like the SEC does in football, but you should have these big-time games.
Kentucky, Kansas, like you would do after the Super Bowl. Like they would have that about
Big
a year
12,
or two ago.
they had the Big 12 SEC Challenge for a number of years in January. You had Kentucky and Gonzaga play a game in Rupp Arena in February last year. You had Duke, Illinois this year. So we're hopefully starting to see a little bit more. And this is something I'm going to ask Coach Lieberman on Wednesday, because we've talked about before, he very much disagrees with it. But you're looking at trying to evaluate these teams and how tough it is. You look at all these different metrics, but everything's set in stone by New Year's Day. And before that, to where I want more league games early in the year and more big-time non-conference games later in the year. Because you look at Louisville and everything we just talked about, how they had the injuries and all that stuff. None of that matters if you're playing Tennessee on February 10th instead of November 10th. Or you're playing, Kentucky the week after the Super Bowl instead of December 14th. You're playing Ole Miss in the middle of January instead of right after Thanksgiving. All these things you look at and you say, so you get a much better representation of evaluating these teams. Instead, we have it to where it's only league games, and you're looking at how the ACC is stacked up and how pathetic of a league it is outside of Duke, Clemson, and Louisville, or I guess Duke, Louisville, and Clemson is the correct order to put that in. But you just don't have those opportunities to get big-time wins. And unless you're North Carolina, where you get rewarded for beating a bunch of quad 2 teams that didn't make the tournament, then you don't have anything to gain outside of the league schedule. It also hurt Louisville immensely that they only got Duke once in the regular season. It was the first game of it. So that was an even more extreme version of it. I guarantee you that Louisville Duke game will not be in December next year, if Josh Hurt has anything to say about that one.
Well, and it's interesting too, because Bobby V brought this up. He did a reaction show last night on ESPN in Louisville, and Bobby V brought it up, and I know Diener said it as well too. It's like the SEC, if it's determined by Thanksgiving, like let's say the SEC for
which it's not by Thanksgiving.
But there's like
before the
New Year.
ACC SEC Challenge. There's still big time. It's before the New Year,
right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, but if you're pigeonholed into that narrative, and then those are deemed quad 1s, and then you just play each other in conference play in the SEC. Of course, you're going to get just quad 1 and quad. So
right.
Like,
but the rebuttal to that is, we've never seen a team do the non-conference that the SEC did this year.
Oh, absolutely. It's not like I want to be abundantly clear. Yeah. The ACC's not good. Like this could be a Big 12 argument or something like that with West Virginia being left out. Like I feel like
that's the biggest screw job of all of them. It's West Virginia being left out. That's
completely agree with that. So look, I mean, everybody knows the Louisville West Virginia dynamic.
Yeah, you have Louisville people going to bat for West Virginia. That's where we're at here.
But it's just wild to me because just seeing the reaction from Pat Kelsey and the team in there at CBS, and just like I wasn't even comfortable yet sitting down. I'm getting my laptop situated. I'm like, what the hell? Dude, you'll love this. This is inside baseball for the ESPN Louisville listeners out here. So you and I have talked about this for years. This is like one of our happiest days. It's our happy place. You know, when Billy Madison, when he like goes off and he goes to his happy place with beer.
And Happy Gilmore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What I say, Billy Madison.
Billy Madison.
I'm sorry, I do that all the time. Billy Madison is my crutch when I say talk to me like I'm in kindergarten for that. Happy Gilmore, the golf movie, where he goes to his happy place. That is Selection Sunday for this. My phone blew up. And it's like, we got to get something on now because we were doing Westwood One's coverage and the CBS coverage on ESPN Louisville, finishing up Louisville City. So Dieter's tried to figure out how to get on a Twitter space immediately and just get on there before he gets to Bobby V. And it's like, I've tried to do this. Meanwhile, I'm trying to like see I didn't see the bracket like in its full.
Same.
for like an hour and a half, 2 hours after, just because of the people were just shocked. They were Shawn Michaels super kicked. Like they were stone cold stunned by just everything that happened on that.
And then so the two big whammies happen within the first four teams that are drawn into the bracket because Louisville's getting there. I'm on my phone. I'm getting blown up, all that stuff. Then I'm watching with a buddy, and he goes, North Carolina. Goes, like, wait, what? North Carolina, what? and like it took like I'll tell you what it like that screw job with West Virginia especially is the biggest thing that they screwed up with this bracket. But it took me about a half hour to 45 minutes to truly get angry about it because I was still so floored and shell shocked about Louisville.
Yeah.
Being in that spot. And it was just the back-to-back haymakers of that within the first 2 minutes of the selection show. I was like, I was almost just done like shedding a tear over Greg Gumbel. And you've just hit us with this.
They're playing the Rolling Stones music. I'm getting emotional. I'm like, man, I was like, Zucker's bringing him in on like a really good feel-good moment. By the way, shout out to Chris Hadfield, the best wager. He's had I think plus 370 to make for North Carolina to make the tournament for those that give a follow up there. I was like, I'll put a shekel or two on that. So I saw that's the brand bump that we always talk about. But no, man, like I was shell shocked from it. Now there's a couple different styles. You can still kind of put a bow and react to everything that happened to the ACC tournament into the championship game. You can get the reaction, and like today's kind of the being and moaning, if you will, of just the bracket as a whole. And then tomorrow you got to start previewing Creighton. You're the first game of the tournament, 12:15 on CBS.
Yeah.
And you know, Creighton ain't no slouch either. Now, I don't know if they're the Creighton of old, but they finished second in the Big East. And I mean, they didn't lack confidence as you watched that Big East final game. I mean, you got the you know, guard over here chirping with Ricky P a little bit and hitting some big time shots in the Garden, which you know was a home court advantage.
Well, that's going to be a really fun game. It is. I will get to it here in a little bit because I want to do a little bit more bracket stuff that then we'll get into that game. But that's one that's going to be really, really fun to see Ashworth and Kalkbrenner, those guys going into Lexington. That's going to be an aesthetically pleasing game. But I do want to do this because everything we've talked about with Louisville here, to blow it out to the bubble and that stuff real quick, because it's such a big story. Even on a Louisville specific pod, you got to hit on it. And I think it's shows one of the ways that honestly it contradicts how they evaluated Louisville with how they evaluated North Carolina, West Virginia, Indiana, and the bubble. Because like I said earlier, Texas getting in, I don't fully agree with, because you take away the 7 quad 4 games. They play no in the non-conference schedule. They're 12-15 in the top 3 quadrants, and you almost never see a team that's 3 games under 500 in the top 3 quadrants get into the field. But again, they have the 7 quad 1 wins. You can reward that. I'm okay with that at the end of the day. Like, it's fine. Xavier had the 1-9 quad 1. I've seen a lot of that of everyone's mad about Carolina. Why aren't you mad about Xavier? I'm like, Xavier's measure's a little bit worse than Carolina's, but Xavier had 4 wins over teams in the tournament. They had a quad 1A win at Marquette. They had and then they had wins over UConn and Creighton as well. So that's like, okay, they've done something to earn that. Carolina, meanwhile, 1-12 quad 1, 1-11 against NCAA tournament teams. I get it. You could say, well, they won 22 games and the gaudy numbers there. You know where that argument holds, Phil? That argument holds if it's UC San Diego or Indiana State and they've played 2 quad 1 games all year.
Right.
Or Drake, which we didn't really have a lot of those types of teams this year because there weren't a lot of bid stealers. And that ultimately was why Carolina got in. But that's the type of argument you can make. That you can't make the, well, you won 22 games argument when you had the opportunity to beat teams in the NCAA tournament, and you proved game after game after game after game that you could not do it. And you compare that to a West Virginia, which to me, like as we know, it's no secret, I went to Indiana. So like, am I mad at Indiana to get in? Yes. Do I was the only situation I was ever going to get mad about them not getting in was if Carolina got in and they didn't? Yes. But Indiana pales in comparison to West Virginia getting screwed here. You talked about the non-conference scheduling earlier. West Virginia went to Atlantis. They beat Gonzaga on a neutral court. They beat Arizona on a neutral court. They won at Fog Allen. And they had 6 quad 1 wins to North Carolina's 1. They had 4 quad 1A wins to North Carolina's 0. Yes, they had some bad losses, but the predictives were not terrible. The WAB, which is the big thing that they were pushing this year, which is quite literally called wins above the bubble. They're 42nd and North Carolina's 43rd. So they're ahead of North Carolina in that. And they've actually proven they can go out and beat NCAA tournament teams. Plus, Carolina had a quad 3 loss to Stanford as well, which isn't ideal. And that's a pretty black eye on it, too. Then you compare it to Indiana, who goes out there again, not as strong of an argument as West Virginia, but when you're just comparing Indiana and North Carolina, Indiana 4 quad 1 wins to North Carolina's 1. Indiana 2 quad 1A wins to North Carolina's 0. Indiana wins over a 2 seed in Michigan State on Michigan State's floor and a 4 seed over Purdue. And North Carolina has a 1-point win in December over UCLA on a neutral court. Plus, North Carolina has the quad 3 loss. Indiana didn't have any quad 1 losses or any losses outside of quad 1. Those two teams, plus Boise State, you had a more traditional mid-major route, had more quad 1 wins than North Carolina, despite being in the Mountain West. Triple the amount of quad 1 wins in North Carolina, despite being in the Mountain West. It had wins over teams that made the field in San Diego State. Better wins than what North Carolina had. So those three teams, and we'll get, but especially West Virginia, you'll get, and again, to tie it back into Louisville, you punished Louisville for losing all their non-conference games that mattered.
Right.
And you didn't punish North Carolina. Please explain to me how you punish Louisville 2-3 seed lines, or really 1 to 2 seed lines. Let's be honest. They should have been, I think, a 6 seed. So how do you punish Louisville for 2 seed lines for not winning any game of note out of conference, and then reward North Carolina for doing an even worse version of that?
I'm with you, man. And I know Strebel and Andy talked about it a little bit too last night on ESPN Louisville. And it was like, Andy brought up a good point too. And
Andy back on the ESPN Louisville.
Yes. He chimed in on that, but Andy's sweet. But it was kind of tongue in cheek, but it was funny to me from the standpoint of, it's one thing with the SEC and football to do. And again, you and I have texted each other. It's like, basketball this year is what they think they are in football. But I'll be damned, the politicking. Greg Sankey's on the network out here saying, like, we're going to get all these teams in. And look, I roll my eyes at it too. But it's like, God, like, I knew it would happen with football. I've kind of prepared myself for that. I never thought it would, like, get to this point with the basketball.
But it's not the SEC teams that I have the problem with. I mean, like, Texas was controversial, but again, you have all those quad one wins. That's fine.
Right, you can make it.
It's the fact that North Carolina, the politicking they did for them was kind of ridiculous.
If Bubba Cunningham to just step aside, it's like, I had to step out of the room. It was perfect. So, by the way.
Bubba Cunningham, like that's, again, I'm not a conspiracy tinfoil hat guy.
Join the side of me and Strebel, baby. Come on, baby.
If Bubba Cunningham is not the chair of the selection committee, North Carolina is not getting in. The only reason they got in is because Bubba Cunningham was in charge of it. And that's something, I know it's not the first time it's happened, but this is the most extreme time we've seen it. You have to take a long look, or I know they won't because that's how the NCAA works, but you have to take a long look at, okay, why are we letting athletic directors who are in charge, who Bubba Cunningham got a raise because North Carolina gets into the tournament, a 6-figure raise and again, going back to what Dan Gavitt said on Saturday on CBS during the Big Ten tournament, the predictive metrics such as the net are not used are not valued when you're looking at who gets into the field. That's for seeding purposes. For who gets into the field, they're looking at stuff like WAB, the result-based metrics, that quad 1 wins. Those are the things that are supposed to hold the day. And the only thing North Carolina had going for them really at any of these metrics are the predictive metrics. So if you're going out there on CBS saying the predictive metrics matter for seeding, not so much for whether you get in or not, then what is the rationale when the net and predictive metrics are literally the only thing you can point to for North Carolina?
Well, and Bubba Cunningham said they used the Torvik rankings this year as a part of
Torvik's a predictive metric.
Yeah, but again, and I'm with you, but like from that, Louisville finished 19th, and this is from our buddy Hatfield to get to. Louisville finished 19th in Torvik. 11 teams that finished below them got a better seed, including Memphis, who finished 60. And I know you went through some of the wins, but I think they need to do this. And I know some of our guys have gone through the brackets walkthroughs of just kind of like the mock selection committee out there. We've had, I think CL Brown Diener talked about it as well. It's like everything that they've kind of gone through on those, we're thrown out the window for this one.
Yeah.
For this season. So
that's
it's
an
like
issue.
we got to get retrained. We got to get retrained on how to. So, and look, I mean, also the other bracketologists were out there. We alluded to this with the bracket matrix that takes 111 brackets. It only 2 of them added all there. You said 4 as many had them as a 4 seed. And it's like, guys, like if I'm a bracketologist, which I think would be a great bit of me just being wrong about everything on there. I kind of want to.
That'd be a very ESPN Louisville bit.
That would just be a great bit on that. It's like put me up against the bracketologist, and I'll be wearing like a doctor's coat. But I would love for somebody to explain just the rundown and the logic of this, and again, kind of explain in better reason, and not doing this thing. It's like, okay, I'm going to let him explain. I had to step out of the room for that. Like it was so meek and just it.
They didn't give any quantitative answers.
Exactly.
They asked Bubba Cunningham, the vice chair, why did Carolina get in, and they did not give one quantitative answer.
Right. It's crazy. This isn't an ACC thing. Carolina should not be in.
Yeah, especially when you look at bracketing, all that stuff. As you said, this is a math game. That's what it's been. And we keep adding more and more numbers to it to make it even more of a math game. If you're going to say, here's why a team got in, you owe us the explanation of the cold, hard facts of this is why this team got in. Hell, even though it's not quantitative, they didn't even say eye test. They didn't give anything. If you said eye test, yeah, people would be uproared and all that stuff because North Carolina really didn't pass the eye test for the vast majority of the season, and they really only did against teams that aren't NCAA tournament teams. But at least you could give them that cookie crumb, I guess. But they didn't give anything on it, which is just absolutely absurd. They didn't give any quantitative reasons on Louisville either for why they were an 8 seed, which is nuts. But I do have this pulled up. I got Torvik pulled up, which by the way, you already got the Baker bunker. So the Baker bracketologist bunker. It has a nice ring to it.
It does. I don't know if I can say it multiple times, but it does have a nice ring
Baker
to it.
bracketology bunker. That is a fun one. So I got Louisville's most similar resumes pulled up here on Bart Torvik. And looking at it, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different resumes pulled up there. And here's an interesting thing, and this shows about where you're at with the ACC these days. You're looking at the conferences these teams are from. I think this is an important thing to note before we get to the actual seedings of it. Creighton in 2012, Missouri Valley. San Diego State in 2014, Mountain West. Memphis in 2023, AAC. Butler in 2010, Horizon League. USC in 2021, a really bad Pac-12. Kansas State in 2013, the Big 12. Northern Iowa in 2015, Missouri Valley. Xavier in 2010, Atlantic 10. BYU in 2021, WCC. New Mexico in 2014, Mountain West. Other than Kansas State in 2013, these are all not power conferences you're looking at. For, I guess, USC technically a power conference of the Pac-12 too, but 8 of these 10 resumes you're comparing, Louisville, an ACC team too, are mid-major conferences. And that to me is a very telling point. You look at the average seeding of those 10 teams, it's 5.9. So you're expecting, again, like a 5 or 6 seed. Creighton was an 8. Memphis was an 8. Creighton in 2012, Memphis in 2023, those were both 8s. Other than that, New Mexico in 2014 was a 7. Everyone else was a 6 or above. Only Kansas State in 2013 was a 5 or was a 4. So you're looking at a lot of teams that weren't seeded as low as Louisville, but also you're seeing the ACC being treated more like the Mountain West or the American or the Horizon League than what you would traditionally think of the ACC in this case.
And that is a massive problem for just the league. And I'm not saying it's not warranted after the season that they had, but I'm just saying, like, moving forward, you heard Dickie V on the ACC championship kind of doing impassioned speeds like, you got to get better coaches there, you got to do it, you got to get more buddy. But it was kind of rich beat on ESPN, that being kind of the contributing factor of the revenue disparity. But a discussion for another day. Okay, so our buddy Kelly Dickey put this out too. And again, I know AP polls do not play
They do not matter at all.
They do not matter. But just for some context of just kind of a new age in college basketball of this. So seed as of the AP number 13 team entering selection Sunday. I don't know if you saw this tweet. So in 2012, Georgetown got a 3 seed. 2013, Florida got a 3 seed. 2014, Cincinnati got a 5 seed. 2015, Iowa State 3. 2016, Purdue a 5. 2017, Purdue a 4. 2018, Tennessee a 3. 2019, Purdue a 3. Texas a 3 in 2021. 2022, UCLA a 4. Virginia a 4, Illinois a 3, and Louisville.
But again, you want to know what the difference is between Louisville and all those other teams? Even Cincinnati in 2014, which was the AAC, but that was the year that Louisville was in the AAC and UConn won the national title out of the AAC, and SMU was the biggest snub of the tournament that year. They probably should have gotten in out of the AAC. You know what the difference is? All those other teams are in much better conferences than what Louisville's in right now.
Well, and that's I'm glad you brought that up because this is very telling. Since 1979, going further back, and I could go through there, it's Louisville and New Orleans are the only two that have ever received an 8 seed.
Yep.
From that in New Orleans in 1993 for that. And to your point, that is telling. And look, I say this all the time. What's the difference between a rat and a guinea pig? One has a good PR agent. I know Greg Sankey doing the car wash and going out there and constantly being hurt. Like, you'll never not convince me.
Right, but Greg Sankey wasn't clamoring for North Carolina.
No. I'm 100%.
And there were 13 SEC teams that fully deserved to be in, and Texas again was the one that could have gone either way. But I'm fine with the benefit of it out there.
Absolutely. And Jim Phillips, I think more so. And again, Carolina got in, so a lot of bracketologists only had 3 teams get in, so they got 4. It's not that. I just think moving forward is the bigger conversation, big picture. The fact that you are saying that they are being lumped in with the Mountain West and these mid-major conferences is a massive, massive problem moving forward.
Unless it's North Carolina and Bubba Cunningham on the chair.
Right. I mean, but still.
but here's the thing, and that's not, as if it was just purely a brand thing. Like, I get it. Like, Indiana's not as big of a brand as North Carolina, but Indiana is a top 6 or 7 brand like Louisville is in the sport. Right. If it was just about the brand and the jersey logo, there's no doubt in my mind that Indiana and North Carolina would have been the matchup, not North Carolina, San Diego State. And I have San Diego State above Indiana, so I think that was right to put San Diego State in. But it is purely a Bubba Cunningham's the chair of the committee. That is the only reason North Carolina's in this field. And it's how can we manipulate this and prop Carolina up just to get him to sneak in so he get his extra $165,000. That's what this is.
I thought that was an onion piece. I got to be honest with you. When I saw that tweet, Zagoria tweeted it out, and I was like, yep. Oh, that's a fake Adam Zagoria thing. And then somebody like did a screenshot underneath it of like something from the article. I was like, this is real. Wow. Yeah. It feels like something from like the onion piece. I thought it was a satire.
And there is also another thing, like the college football. One thing I hope that doesn't happen, because this is something that I kind of paraded around about college basketball this past fall, was we saw when there was the college football playoff, seedings and all that stuff, which I do think the playoff bracket got it right, but that's a conversation for the other day. But we saw for the next 6 weeks, the games didn't matter. All people argued was who should have gone in and not. And it was just toxic and gross and just, quite frankly, completely annoying and took away from it. What I love about college basketball, we've never seen a screw job like this in terms of West Virginia and North Carolina. So I'm hoping this doesn't change. But we've seen, like, whether it be VCU in 2011, who probably shouldn't have gotten in, Syracuse in 2016, who probably shouldn't have gotten in, but making Final Four runs. What we've seen is, in the past, people will do kind of what we're doing today. They'll bitch and moan and point out how this is wrong for about a day. And then after that, you get your bracket, you fill out the bracket, you get caught up in the emotions and the storylines and the greatness that is the NCAA tournament. So what I'm hoping for...
Then it just floats away, and it just floats away and never to be heard from again. And we'll bring it up occasionally as like another stat from, the New Orleans in 1993. Right. But you're right, it'll just disappear and fade into the...
So I'm hoping that with North Carolina and that aspect of it, and with Louisville, that doesn't continue to be the story for the rest of the tournament on a national level, because it shouldn't be, because this has been an incredible season of college basketball. It's been an incredible season locally for Louisville after everything that's happened. And yeah, you can feel you got screwed or whatever, but at the end of the day, there's nothing you can do about that now. So like, we've done 45 minutes of bitching and moaning and whining about it, but I don't think that should be the main story of the tournament going forward. It should be, okay, you got 4 of the best 1 seeds you've ever seen. You've got Rick Pitino and St. John's. You got Louisville back in the NCAA tournament. You have so much good to talk about. Let's not just tear everything apart to talk about how terrible the selection process was for the next 3 weeks, because that's the worst thing we can do. I do want to hit on this, though. The other thing, I'll actually give Bubba Cunningham credit for this. I thought this was a very interesting answer, but that the new age in terms of the expanded conferences and all that stuff, and the SEC getting 14 teams in, that the question that Gary Parrish asked Bubba Cunningham on CBS Sports Network last night was incredibly telling on this. Because he asked him, hey, how come Louisville as an 8 seed is getting to play de facto home games and you're punishing Auburn, the number 1 overall seed in the tournament, by making them play road games in Lexington? And the answer that Bubba Cunningham came echoes an answer that he gave when Seth Davis, I believe, asked him this on the bracket preview show back in February. This was about St. John's playing in Newark at that point, which of course St. John's ended up being a 2 seed and they're out west now. But
Right.
the answer that Bubba Cunningham gave was, look, we had to relax some of the bracketing principles with 14 SEC teams in. And because of that, we wanted to make sure above all else, we did not move teams' seed lines. Because of all these SEC teams being in. And you look at the 8-9 lines, you got Mississippi State as an 8 seed, you have Georgia as a 9 seed, you have Oklahoma as a 9 seed. So you had 3 SEC teams in that 8-9 line, which means you did not want to put them against Auburn in that second round game for an in-league game. So what happens as a result is, because you don't want to change the seed lines and all that stuff, Louisville, which I guess was going to be an 8 regardless, which you can argue that as much as you want, ends up being the team that gets almost rewarded by the SEC having 14 teams in, to where you get Lexington, you get de facto home games, and you get, not that I'm going to pick Louisville to beat Auburn, but the only chance I think Louisville was going to have in one of these 1-8 games in the round of 13, you got to get by Creighton first, obviously, is if you're playing in Lexington in front of what's going to be an absolutely bonkers crowd. We've seen this before, both in terms of the 1-8 and also Louisville. 2 years ago, if you remember, 2023, Houston had to play, ironically, Auburn in Birmingham, and people made a big deal about that. Then Houston just kind of handled their business, won by like 18 or something. We saw Louisville as a 6 seed back in 2007 in Rupp Arena play Texas A&M as a 3 seed in what was a classic of a game. Edgar Sosa had 31, 34 points, something like that.
AC Law, is that an AC Law? Man, got Billy Gillespie the gig, Kentucky. Yeah,
but
boy.
That was a classic game there. A&M won that one by a bucket. By the way, AC Law, I learned this over the summer, is Ernie Banks' nephew.
Huh.
Which is a crazy.
I did not know that either.
Yeah, crazy stat there. You also have, in a little bit different of a scenario, Indiana as a 5 seed playing Duke in the Sweet 16 in Rupp Arena in 2002, ended up winning that game. So it's not completely unheralded to see something like this happen, but it is very rare. And I do wonder if it's something that's going to happen more often now, as we have these mega conferences with so many teams in there, to where you look at it and say, I don't really love it. But in this case, because you don't want to punish these teams that have gotten the right to have the location preferences and all that stuff. And part of it is also just bad luck. There wasn't a pod closer to Auburn than Lexington this year. That's part of it as well. But from a big picture standpoint, I don't love the idea of Louisville getting to play a home game as an 8 seed against a 1 seed. However, as someone who's doing a Louisville podcast, that is a hell of a great consolation prize for kind of getting screwed on the seed line there, because that's something that, especially with how this season's gone out and where Louisville's been, Louisville fans are going to be absolutely ecstatic that they only have to travel an hour 15 or so down I-64 to see this team for the first weekend.
Well, and I know we'll get into the Creighton game coming up in a bit, but I want to commend you on something, because I need to check myself and recalibrate some things too, because it's like going back to the COVID year when Louisville was the first team that was left out. Then I was like, bracket matrix had all these things that was in there. It's like, I don't know, man. I was like, we've never seen anything like this, where teams haven't been able to play, haven't been able to, due to COVID and how much
that was a weird year.
It was a weird year. But you brought it up about the mega conference, all that, verbal just salad that we were talking about. It's like, it's not fair for this. We're still kind of getting calibrated and our minds checked on the new mega conferences too. So it's like it's a record for the SEC, but this is still in its infancy of just what these mega conferences are going to have moving forward and how much access they are going to have. So I say that from the standpoint, yes, the ACC has a massive PR problem where it's being lumped in more with the Mountain West versus the SEC.
That's not a PR problem. That's an on-the-court production problem.
But 100%, yes, but still, for the scope of just the conference, that is a massive feat that they need to overcome and fast. And I know they want to get on the holier than thou. Oh, I don't know if NC State wants to do Will Wade. I don't know if Virginia wants. Like, again, that's a bigger discussion than I know Dickie V and Corey Alexander and Dave O'Brien talked about on.
You know what Will Wade does? He wins games, and he might beat an ACC coach and Brad Brownell in that first round too.
Exactly. So, by the way, I love he was kind of doing his honkish, Clemson fan thing with that at his press conference. You see that circulating on there? He said, said we don't schedule practices around when they're playing. It's like, oh, if Brunell goes to, maybe he's holding out for Brunell to go to IU for that. He's like, I can slide into that Clemson job. But no, I think that's a good pull from you with the mega conference stuff, because it's still in its infancy, and we're trying to, people can get up and upset about the amount of teams getting in, but these are uncharted waters in terms of amount of teams that these conferences are having now too.
Are there people upset that the SEC got 14 in?
No, I mean, I think I think again, this is what I was talking about with kind of the college football component of, like, I think that's seeping into the sport, at least, from our text on. I'm with you. The SEC was incredible this year. I think Florida, we can give Final Four picks. I don't know what you're trying to do at the Reddit show. I think Florida is trending in the right direction at the right time.
They're the best team in the country right now.
They are really, really good if you haven't been able to watch it, because you hate the SEC. But look, I'm with you on just the ACC has to fix this problem, and it's gotta get. You can't do if a guy has a little baggage. I think who cares? Like,
I think the college footballization of it is them doing whatever they could to get North Carolina in. I don't think it had anything to do with the SEC this year. Plus, if you remember, who was the first team left out of the tournament last year? Who was the not nearly as controversial as anything this year, but was the controversial, like, oh, that's weird. It was a team that won 5 quad 1 games and didn't have any losses outside of quad 1. It was Oklahoma out of the SEC.
Okay. Yeah, no, you're right. Look, I mean, yeah, it's an uphill battle. Just the ACC is not good. You can, but my problem more so, like you, is with West Virginia being screwed. North Carolina, no way, shape, or form should have made it in there. However, that's what I go back to, of just like the brand bump to get it there. So from the ACC, so that's a point in the ACC on that front. Now, switching it up, I don't want to navigate you one way or another on this Creighton game coming up.
Yes, that's where I was going to next.
So, I mean, like,
I'm fascinated by it.
Same. Like, I went to the KFC Yum Center games a couple years ago when they played San Diego State, and just like an epic, and they travel well too. So, I mean, again, it's not right down the road for like Louisville, but I'm fascinated to see how many fans they bring to, because they care about basketball there as well. You got the Pepper component with Omaha, that being his hometown. So it's going to be fascinating to see. First game of the tournament. Hopefully, it's not a Minnesota, Morehead State type of theme.
Yeah, first game of the tournament hasn't been kind to Louisville in the past. I know that a lot of Louisville fans were not happy about that, but the bright side is if you win the game, you get to enjoy the rest of the first weekend, or the rest of the first round stress-free there, which is fun. But I'll say this. First of all, I do expect it to be a fully Louisville dominant crowd, just because, number one, like, Creighton brought people, don't get me wrong, to the Yum Center, but it wasn't like they took over the Yum Center. I'll put it this way. I got tickets to those games, Sweet 16, Elite 8 in the Yum Center. And it was Alabama, San Diego State, Creighton, and Princeton. And tickets dropped out of the wazoo because there weren't teams around there. But, like, it was a lot of local people that went, to be honest, just because Louisville people in Louisville love basketball. And Creighton was probably the most represented of the 4 fan bases, but it wasn't like they took over the Yum Center, I mean. So I think it's going to be a really, really, really heavy Louisville crowd in this. We'll see how much Auburn travels. I know Auburn, Alabama, different fan bases, but I was honestly disappointed in how Alabama traveled up to Louisville for that Sweet 16 game a couple years ago when they were the number 1 overall seed, and it was kind of like, okay, this is kind of your moment here, and there's some of you guys, but it's not like you think of, Louisville or Kentucky taking over an Indy or a Rupp Arena or that type of thing. It was nothing like that, to where I wonder how Auburn's going to do, because probably a little bit of a smaller fan base, but similar drive, all that stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how that side of it plays out. I think it's going to be a very dominant Louisville crowd, though, especially with the excitement of being back in the tournament, all that, and how close it is. But I'm fascinated from the standpoint of, one, these are 2 teams. It's the first game of the tournament because you want to start off with a banger. And I think this game could be an absolute banger. The way both teams play, both love to shoot the 3. Both are really good at shooting the 3. Both are, ironically, shorthanded, too, because we all know about Louisville and their injuries. But Pop Isaacs has been out for Creighton since around Thanksgiving as well. So they've kind of had to adjust in a very similar way to Louisville has. But for Creighton, it's all about Steven Ashworth, and Ryan Kalkbrenner. Kalkbrenner, the 4-time Big East Defensive Player of the Year. The only other guy to do that is Patrick Ewing. So that's pretty damn good. He's been at Creighton since, Kyle Korver was there, the mid-2000s, it feels like. But you look at it, and there's two things. One, you figure Louisville will kind of do a similar thing to what they did against like North Carolina RJ Davis, to where they're going to throw waves at Stephen Ashworth, whether it be Chucky Hepburn and Terrence Edwards. Ashworth is a guy, as you said, talking bleep to the MSG crowd on Saturday night. I did what was another de facto road game.
Didn't lack confidence.
Yeah, he does not lack confidence. He'll pull from anywhere. He's incredibly fun to watch. He's not the most athletic or quick guy, but he's shifty. He's sneaky shifty is the great way of putting it. Which I know you give the wry smile there, because I'm doing the thing there, but he has in the gym range, can shoot from anywhere. They're going to put him in a lot of pick and rolls, and you can't go under screens with him. You got to fight through him. You got to hedge, and you got to do that. And then Kalkbrenner is going to be an issue on both ends of the floor for Louisville. That's going to be the biggest key. Is one, James Scott got to stay out of foul trouble. And because he's really your only size, and they're going to really try to establish Kalkbrenner on that block, and they'll put him in different ways. They'll short roll him, they'll pop him and pick and roll, they'll have him, dive hard to the basket after setting screens. So they're going to get him involved in that, and they have shooting all over the floor too. So it's tough to double Kalkbrenner. What they don't have is a lot of guys that can beat you off the bounce. That was really Pop Isaacs' role, and that's where they have kind of taken a step back from where they were the previous few years, where they were, again, in the Elite Eight, had a real chance at the Final Four a couple years ago in Louisville, were in the Sweet 16 last year. They don't, when they had Ryan Nembhard a couple years ago too as well. They don't really have that dynamic guard that they've had the past couple years, and that's why they're a 9 seed instead of like a 3 or a 4 seed. But offensively, Greg McDermott is one of the best offensive minds in the sport. They're going to do a lot. And then defensively, what I look at, then I'll let you give your thoughts on it, Phil, is they're going to play Kalkbrenner in that deep drop coverage. And that's something that it's going to be really hard for Louisville to get to the rim in this game because of how deep they like to drop Kalkbrenner. What that opens up is a lot of shots that you don't really love to see analytically these days. But I think that's one of the reasons why St. John's is a bad matchup for him, because they love that mid-range 12, 15-foot jumper. You think about Terrence Edwards getting into the lane and kind of, having that jump stop little finish from like 10 feet out. You're going to see a lot of that in this game. Can Chucky Hepburn get a little bit of a floater game going? Javon Hadley in the short corner post, I think, is going to be something that's effective, because it's going to be hard to get, like those easy lobs to James Scott or Traore or those types of guys, because Kalkbrenner is the best rim defender in college basketball. He does not foul. I don't think he's ever fouled out in a college game in his career. If he has, it happened recently, and it would be the first time. He's incredible at staying vertical, going straight up, using all of his wingspan, and making it incredibly hard to finish around the rim. So that's going to be a challenge for Louisville offensively. They're going to need to hit some shots, getting Rain Smith back, hopefully, which there's some politicking for you, them saying that Rain Smith was going to be back. But if he is indeed back, that's going to be a big deal for Louisville as well, to stretch the floor a little bit. But those are the two things I'm looking at with Louisville on both ends of the floor.
Yeah, and to your point about the big man matchups, yeah, I'm with you. I think James Scott is definitely going to have to stay out of foul trouble on this standpoint. It was funny. Was it the Clemson game or the Frank Ansem on eBay with it for a second? Chucky tried to throw a lob to him, just went through his hands a little bit. It's like, not the same James Scott effect on that. But, I think from the rebounding that you've seen glimpses of from somebody like Noah Waterman, Javon Hadley, who plays up there, James Scott, this seems like a different beast. But I said the same thing with Renault. I said the same thing, with Clemson and Duke's big. So they've had success. It got sloppy at times. It hasn't been. It hasn't been perfect, but this, to your point, it feels like a different animal in the big for the big standpoint. Rain Smith, Mark Blankenbaker was sending me video back from Charlotte, basically saying that he was trying to give it a go. Going through the warm-ups felt good. It was more of a precautionary thing. I'm curious if they would have known the seating line, if they would have tried to have Rain Smith try to play that game just to limit to what that would possibly do, but I think that's neither here nor there. But you know what you're going to get from Terrence Edwards. Terrence Edwards, I was talking about with Lieberman on the V Show and with Nikki V about he has this ability, his stat lines, and I don't know if it's just maybe I'm just putting it all together with his slow shot release. He has the quietest stat lines ever. Now the Duke game, it
was loud.
It was very loud, right? But there's been other times I'm like, damn, he has a 25 there. How did he arrive there? But I think what I'm concerned about is you've seen the blueprints kind of been out at the end of the Clemson game, obviously the majority of the Stanford game, and even the Duke game in the championship game. They've taken away some things. And when Chucky Hepburn, although he started out pretty hot in the ACC championship game, they mucked it up a lot. And I'm curious if Creighton's going to try and do that and take it away. But every time I think that's going to happen. They come back, they fight back on some of those things. I know they were down 15 against Stanford. Stanford ain't Creighton. So that's a different animal.
So Creighton's a pretty team though.
Okay.
I mean, whereas Clemson's a team that likes to muck it up and is going to be really physical. Creighton's a team, they don't play extremely fast this year, but they're a team that, plays in space. They, rely on a lot of their player movement, their ball movement, all those things, to where I don't think it's going to be the type of grinded out game that we see like a Clemson play or what Duke turned the second half into. I think it's going to be a little bit more open with how Creighton likes to play, whereas what Louisville does. What I'm worried about is Louisville, because Creighton's also not a very good rebounding team. They do want to get back defensively. Like they don't send a lot of dudes to the offensive glass. They're hovering in the top 200 in offensive rebounding percentage. So they're going to try to keep Louisville out of transition from that standpoint, which is a fair argument. But they're not going. I don't think they're going to be overly physical in this game. I mean, Kalkbrenner, straight up. I mean, Creighton doesn't foul. That's one of their things, and that's always been a thing for them, is that they really don't foul often. I'm looking for the stat to see if it shows how much they foul. I thought Ken Pom has that, but they don't. But Creighton is number one. Here's a good one for you. They only 17% of opposing points come from the free throw line. That is best in the country.
Wow. Okay. So they don't foul.
They don't foul. Because of that, though, that means they aren't aggressive defensively, which means they aren't as physical. But they don't create turnovers because of that. They're the third worst team in the country in defensive turnover percentage. So you look at it, there are a lot of, okay, we're going to just try to make you shoot over us. Is kind of what they try to do, whether it's Kalkbrenner in the lane or just kind of trying to just stay in front of guys. That's really your defense. They want you to shoot jump shots over them. That's what everything's built around. They're not forcing a lot of turnovers. They're not really getting up in your grill or anything like that, to where they're not going to muck it up in the same way as a Clemson or a Duke will. That's just not who they are.
By the way, real quick, some breaking news on this recorded podcast. I know the Basses care. Tobin Anderson actually out at Iona. That's I just saw that from Jeff Borzello. I know, shocking on that front, but I know it was kind of the darling of the tournament a while back. But I just saw that circulating out there. Jeff Borzello, Pete Thamilton put that out there as well. So just kind of random.
Yeah, like, we got the crown bracket out also too.
yeah. I know we gotta wrap up here in a bit, but I mean, just your expectations for the upcoming game. Like, I mean, I'm terrified of this game, but you just gave me some reasons to why I shouldn't be. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I think the world of Greg McDermott, but you tell me why Louisville fans shouldn't be concerned about this game, or should they? Like, massively, because I'm not saying 8-9. It's like a coin flip.
I don't think it's a coin flip. I think probably like 60-40 for Louisville on this.
I think I've seen a 2.5 point favorite of the
which I think that's fair. I think the fact that Louisville, I think, has more weapons. They're going to be able to. They have three guys in Hepburn, Hadley, and Edwards that can get into that mid-range game a little bit. That's going to need to be, sounds sacrilegious to talk about basketball in 2025, but that's what Creighton makes you do. If you can do that, if you can hit shots, I think Creighton doesn't turn the ball over a lot. So I don't know if you're going to be creating a lot of turnovers getting into transition, but can Hepburn and Edwards have success? You're not going to frustrate Ashworth. You're not going to make him lose confidence, but can you make him be inefficient? And I think between Hepburn and Edwards, Louisville can do that. And other than Ashworth, you got some guys that can be spot-up shooters, but not a lot of dudes that are going to beat you off the dribble. Kalkbrenner is really the main thing. You got to contain him on the offensive end as well. But I think Louisville just has more weapons than Creighton, to where I think, plus the fact that it is going to be a raucous de facto home game for Louisville does give them an edge also. It's a tough game. It's a game that Louisville can lose for sure. but I do have a level of confidence in Louisville winning. How about you, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, I gotta. It's not the same Creightons from previous years. I'm
Right.
with you on that. Everything I've done at deep dive, I'm not gonna fake take it and say I've watched every Creighton game out there. Watch the Big East tournament with him, and then I think Greg McDermott's one of the best coaches
That was
out there.
reliving my childhood watching that Big East tournament title game.
Oh boy! Before we get out of here, we got to talk about his little bracket with a potential matchup. You got
Oh yeah.
Calipari itself, and then potentially Calipari and Pitino or Self and Pitino, which I know people would love.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I need to get out of the KP PTSD that has been out there.
KPSD.
Yes, and this is something that there has been moments throughout the season where it's like, man, when it's looked bleak. They've just come out and look. I mean, the Stanford game, but I'm just thinking to myself, it's like, okay, if you get Rain Smith back, some good things could potentially happen. If you get James Scott hitting on all cylinders with that,
and you do need Rain Smith back because we saw over the weekend how much they need floor spacing.
Absolutely,
and that becomes really tough, especially with Kalkbrenner if he doesn't actually end up playing on Thursday.
And look, I mean, Javon Hadley, I think is just kind of the unsung hero that doesn't get all the flowers that, Terrence Edwards and Chucky Hepburn gets or Rain Smith gets. But I mean, he is as Pat Kelsey said, a dog in terms of defensively, things like that. I think he got some good moments from Abubakar Traore, who plays way bigger than his actual size. I mean, you saw it in the Clemson game. So I'm with you on that. Man, it's just, it's trying to retrain my mind to get on there. I still think, I'm not confident about it, but I think Louisville pulls away that 2.5 point lines. I don't think I'm going to touch it with a 10-foot pole, but I think Louisville can take care of business because of the home court advantage on that. Now, we could be getting ahead of ourselves, with Auburn and things like that, but I'm just focused on Creighton right now. I don't even want to think about Auburn on Saturday, a potential matchup on Saturday.
All right, so let's do this. So it's 11:17 a.m. when we're recording this right now. You had told me 11:15 was when we wanted to wrap up by, because I'm on Phil's time here. Very appreciative of him taking time out of his workday to hop on the pod here. Do you have more time to do a little bit more, or do you need to hop off? No pressure.
I can do about 10 more minutes.
Perfect, because I wanted to hit on Pitino, Cal, and also Final Four picks.
Okay, let's do it.
Were the two things I had. So I wanted to kind of figure out, okay, do we have time for one of these, both of these, none of these? Let's go. So Pitino, Cal, and Self in the same pod. Hilarious. Absolutely hilarious.
It's math. It's not made for TV.
But I want to ask you this question, because first of all, I don't know who's going to win that Kansas-Arkansas game. That's going to be a fascinating one to me. I don't think that Arkansas has anyone like a Big Z's trying to guard Hunter Dickinson. That's not going to go well for them. And Kansas has just kind of said, you know what, we're going down with as far as Hunter Dickinson takes us, which, you know what, fair. He's your best offensive player. And Arkansas has been playing a lot better lately on the other end. They get Boogie Flan back. Does Cal do the most John Calipari thing ever and just bench Nelly Davis for Boogie Flan, even though Nelly Davis finally got things going? That would be kind of hilarious. But I want to ask you this. Let's say Arkansas beats Kansas and plays St. John's in that second game. Louisville fans, first of all, everyone around the state's been in this situation before, Pitino and Cal. And I love St. John's. I think I have them in the Elite Eight right now. But that's the one game I'm like, we know the history there with how that goes. But first of all, how do you see that game going with Pitino and Cal?
I mean,
if that were to happen.
Well, I mean, look, because you're right. You have an entire generation of fan guys our age that's all, Cal dominated Pitino was there. He got it between his ears, regardless of what happens with John Calipari at Kentucky, to where it correlate to Arkansas now with that. It's different, but that is a fascinating question because the game really, now that he's removed from Louisville, Rick Pitino, and Cal's removed from because
Kentucky, Pitino seems a lot more relaxed now.
Exactly. He doesn't say as much as how much it bothered. Now him doing the car wash and all the tours with some of the people that very crushed him, and going back to Big Blue Madness, and that's a whole nother discussion there. But man, my mind tells me Pitino, but man,
there's just a pit in your gut, isn't there?
Right. It's John Calipari has owned Pitino in all these other things outside of like 2 games. Like, I'm with you, but I'm curious, not having the Louisville across his chest, if he could kind of let what's left of his hair down a little bit now and just kind of relax a little bit more. But
it's the ultimate test of that. I do think it also helps that you think of the 2 times they've been in the tournament, when Pitino's at Louisville, Cal's at Kentucky. It was the Sweet 16, the Final Four, where normally when you think of Pitino, it's 14-1 record in the Sweet 16. You don't want to give him the week to prepare. Or you think about all the other times of the regular season where Louisville had a lot of time to prepare for it. That's kind of the overstress and the stress meter and the ball winding tighter and tighter, part of what did them in. That's something that Coach Lieberman's talked about on the podcast before. The fact that it's the second round and only the 48-hour turnaround may actually help Pitino a little bit here to where it doesn't give him much time to think about it, which is an interesting angle as well. But I do think they would eventually get through. But how would Louisville fans feel if that matchup happens and Pitino does win that game? Because you've been in that spot so many times where he couldn't deliver it. Now it's St. John's in Arkansas. That's the time that he's able to get through with it.
Well, yeah, it's funny because I thought you were going somewhere different with the question, and then I'm glad
where'd you think I was going?
Well, no, I just thought you, like, who is Louisville going to be rooting for? I'm like, I feel like our entire engagement on our social
you still root for St. John's. Yeah.
Well, exactly. It's the Pitino component, all that. But I said this all the time, but this is where I push back a little bit when people, and I'm going to make this hyper Louisville real quick, and I know we got to get to our Final Four picks, but you'll love this. One of the things that people were losing their mind about on the ACC championship broadcast was just the amount of times they showed Cooper Flag and just look. And I know it's out there, and apparently they did maybe like one throwaway line on Rain Smith being out there, but it's not the same caliber of Cooper Flag that of moving the needle. You need to understand that. It's the very reason to make it hyper local on this. Like there's the same 10 people that get upset when we post something about a Rick Pitino stat of something that he's doing at St. John's. And it's, including the Louisville and Kentucky times here and putting those all, you've seen the graphics out there. We put out Louisville, and this is a small sample size, and I don't think it's indicative of like pure measurement of interest, but it accounts for some. I would say Louisville post game, Louisville winning a big game, we'll get a few thousand likes and engagement on there. Okay. Kentucky losing, that gets a little spike there too with the Louisville fans chiming in on that, and the Kentucky fans just battle. Rick Pitino dwarfs it all, dude. Like it's just like I put up the stat about the graphic from Fox about taking the sixth or fifth or sixth team to the NCAA tournament.
Sixth team to the NCAA tournament, fifth team to win a conference tournament. No other coach has done either one of those things before.
It's gotten, seriously, no joke, it's probably gotten like I think over like 500,000 engagement like things and impressions, and it's like that's why, like, I'm not trying to be like clickbaity guy, and I'm not putting up anything like that's disingenuous, but if something's mentioned about Louisville, Kentucky up there, obviously we're going to put it on our station page. It dwarfs it all. So I push back a little bit on the standpoint of, they're talking about Cooper Flag. Dude moves the needle. Zion Williamson when he was at Duke. Move the needle.
And also, Rain Smith's a really good player, and it impacted Louisville in a lot of ways. It's not the same impact of not having the number one player at the NBA draft. It's just not.
100% with you on that. Now, we can talk about the bigger debate of just the coverage of the sport, and I feel like we do that every time.
Right, but let's go back to the initial question, though. How do Louisville fans react if Pitino beats Cal this time when the one thing he couldn't do consistently at Louisville was that?
I would say it would – that's a good question. I would say
I think that's a better question than who they're rooting for. Because we know
because they're rooting for Rick Pitino. They're not rooting for Kenny Payne or John Calipari.
Right.
But I would say, man, I think a lot of it they would just kind of be like, you got to be kidding me. It's seriously now's the time you decide that it like this doesn't bother you, and they still kind of have the lottery picks that he had at Kentucky last year to where he has at Arkansas aren't the same caliber of what they've had in years past at Lexington. But make no mistake about it, it's still going to bother the majority of Louisville fans. It's like, dude, like we've been wanting you to do this the entire tenure that John Calipari was here, and now you decide to do it when you're a different shade of red up in the Big Apple.
It was the one thing on the court that didn't happen consistently when he was at Louisville, which would be wild. So let's do this. So I'm struggling with my Final Four picks. I don't think I've ever struggled like this because for full disclosure last night. So like I said, there was the shocker of Louisville, then the whiplash of North Carolina, to where I normally right after the selection show, I fill out a bracket immediately. I didn't fill out a bracket until probably about 9 p.m. on Sunday night. And when I did it, and just because I was so within the inertia of like the Louisville stuff and the Carolina stuff that I just didn't get to it. And I'm looking at the full bracket and I'm filling out the bracket. I get to the Elite Eight and I get to the Final Four. And this is something I've never done before. One, because it never happens other than 2008. And two, just because someone's going to lose somewhere. It always happens. I'm sitting there. I'm looking at my Elite Eight matchups. I have all 4 1 seeds in the Final Four. I'm like, What am I doing here?
You and Jay Williams, you're being.
I was not
taken.
all right. So Jay Williams had a 1-2 in every single one. So I
Oh,
don't have
really?
that at least. But I'm sitting there like, there's no way this is gonna happen, right? Right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm looking at the bracket, and I think, like Auburn. I think that Louisville Auburn game, which I'm not going to pick Louisville to beat Auburn, if Louisville gets by Creighton, I think that's Auburn's toughest challenge until facing a Michigan State in the Elite Eight, which I think they're more talented and better than Michigan State. It's actually my bracket now has frozen on.
No, that's what I pull it up
page.
right now.
But I'm looking at them like, who in the top half of that bracket's going to beat them? I think Michigan and A&M might lose their first round games. You look at Duke, and I don't see Oregon or Arizona knocking them off. Alabama's has the highest ceiling of anyone in the country, but I kind of think BYU might go on a run in that bottom half of the bracket. And you're looking at like Houston, who's beating them in the Midwest, like Purdue or Clemson, Gonzaga maybe in the 8-9 game. That might be the one. Like the 8-9 games are kind of the toughest ones. I think those are tougher. They're going to be than a lot of the Sweet 16 matchups for these teams. And Florida, maybe Maryland in the Sweet 16. That might be one, but I think Florida just has a lot more depth than them. St. John's, if St. John's is able to knock down shots, I'm looking at them like, where do these one seeds actually lose? And that's something that I've never actually thought about when it comes to the NCAA tournament before. So that's what I have right now. We'll see if it stays that way. We still have a couple days before we lock it in, because I am in a world of, I've never been in this spot before where I'm like, crap, where do these one seeds lose before the Final Four?
Well, and give me some like dark horse teams that like the hipster picks for Jack Grossman along the way that some aren't like really talking about, that I feel like aren't on the mainstream. But if everything's chalky, do you have any hipster picks along the way?
Right now I have BYU in the Elite Eight. I have High Point in the Sweet 16.
Okay.
And I'm going to have either UC San Diego or Yale in the Sweet 16.
Okay.
Is kind of where I'm at. And then I'm trying to figure out what the hell I'm going to do with the pod that Kentucky's in, because I do not trust anyone in that pod. And I might have to wait to see who wins that first 4 game before I really make a final decision on that one, because man, do I not trust Kentucky or Illinois or anyone there. That's Texas and Xavier. So maybe I look at something at that as well. That's those are the big out there ones that I got.
Yeah.
What about you, Phil?
So, and just going through it real quick again, like I got a late start on mine too, but I hate going chalky. This is going to be kind of chalky on that. I love Houston. I
do too.
Houston, I think Kelvin Sampson is just an absolute. It's just one of those things. I feel like when you look back like on 20 years, you're just going to like, damn, man, I can't believe he didn't like win the big one. You know what I mean? So it
well,
feels
he
like
might do it this year.
Well, I was going to say, but it's like it being in a collision course for a guy that could finally get it. So that's one that I'm kind of circulating. So right now, I have Michigan State, which don't feel good about. I always want to throw like kind of a wrench in there, which I just went against how good Florida's been playing. But again, whenever I think someone's going to, they're the Bo Ryan effect of Wisconsin of my childhood. So I'm going to try to zig when others zag, what I always have on there. I'm actually going to have Texas Tech in the Final Four. It's kind of a hipster. I mean,
I love JT Toppin. That is definitely a hipster pick.
It is.
They got some injuries, which is
but it's just one of the things where it's like, man, Florida's playing great. Everyone's going to be picking them, but maybe crazier things have happened. Duke and Houston, man, if they get Cooper Flag, it just feels like I've seen the metrics out there. I think that game will be for the national championship, but I will have Duke and Michigan State in the championship with Duke winning it all, and I do not feel good about that.
Fair. That's fair. I mean, Duke could definitely win it. Any 4 of those 1 seeds. They're the 4 best teams in the country. Like I'm debating throwing Michigan State in there over Auburn, but I think the 2 games for the 1 seeds. I mean, maybe St. John's is able to get by Florida, but I just think Florida has too much offensive firepower there. But if St. John's hitting shots like they were on Saturday night, you never know. But those are 2 in like 1-2 games. And then I look at kind of the 1-8 games of, could a Louisville ride the home court advantage and knock off an Auburn? Could a VJ Edgecombe or a Josh Hubbard explode in a second round game against Duke? Less likely. Could a Gonzaga beat Houston, who's a top 10 team in KenPom? Could Oklahoma and Jeremiah Fears or Dan Hurley catch fire here? Those are the games where if I go against a one, other than the Elite Eight, that might be, or other than Maryland, maybe in the Sweet 16, that's kind of where I'm looking at. But like, you're telling me I'm really going to pick Louisville to beat Auburn? I'm really going to pick Gonzaga to beat Houston? It's like you could see it happening, but it's just maybe you got to take a shot somewhere, and that's where it becomes. But that's where we got a couple days to figure that one out.
Yeah, look, I don't feel good about I feel like that Duke Houston game, if everything goes according to plan,
I would love to see that. That'd be awesome.
I think that would be for the national championship. Whoever comes out of that game would be the winner of that. But they are, I mean, Houston is just, God, they are freaking dogs defensively, and they are athletic as can be. But yeah, hopefully we're talking about it. I know you're trying to get Lieberman, maybe Ennis on throughout the week, but hopefully we're talking more about the win. But I am terrified of this Creighton game. You've eased my anxiety a little bit, but it sounds like,
well, you can blame me if I'm wrong then, but
trust me, I will. Damn it, Jack Grossman.
So Lieberman and I are back on Wednesday. That is the plan for right now. May have something tomorrow too that we'll see. I guess you know how it goes with these things. This is our third pod in 4 days, so we're giving you a lot here, but so we're having fun. The best time of year to be doing it. Phil, really do appreciate the time, my man. Always enjoy having you. We'll catch up with you soon. We'll be back either tomorrow or Wednesday, one of those 2 days here to keep previewing Louisville, Creighton, NCAA March Madness. I'll give you an actual Final Four and a champion whenever I actually make up my mind on that front. But for Phil Baker, I'm Jack Gross.